11 judges weighing up a government's controversial decision. The UK Supreme Court is considering whether or not it was legal for Boris Johnson to suspend Parliament in the run-up to Brexit. Our hearings began today and a verdict isn't expected until Thursday at the earliest. It could have huge implications both for Brexit and for the Prime Minister's tenure. Natalie Hewitt has this report.
He wasn't there in person, but Boris Johnson's self-styled alter ego was, as protests marked the launch of the Supreme Court's hearings. In one of the most significant constitutional cases of modern times, Britain's top legal authority is considering claims led by anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller that the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament to prevent MPs from acting against his Brexit policy. In her opening remarks, the presiding judge insisted that the hearing was a legal, not political matter.
It is important to emphasise that we are not concerned with the wider political issues which form the context for this legal issue. As will be apparent when we hear the legal arguments, the determination of this legal issue will not determine when and how the United Kingdom leaves the European Union.
Johnson suspended Parliament for an unprecedented 5 weeks after MPs passed a law requiring him to ask the EU for an extension to the October 31st deadline if no deal is reached by then. Critics accuse him of trying to stymie Parliament. He says they're trying to stop Brexit.
Well, let's get more on this story now. We can talk to our UK correspondent Vincent McAvenny, who joins us from outside the UK Supreme Court. Well, Vincent, we're often accused in the media of blowing some of these events out of proportion, but you can't really underestimate the international attention this event is receiving, can you?
Good afternoon, Tokes. Well, yeah, I spoke to one official inside the court today who said the numbers watching on the live stream were the highest that they had ever had. This is the first time this court has had an emergency session like this out of its normal term time. And as you can see, the world's media have come, and there are both Leave and Remain protesters here and a heavy police presence as well. And inside, the court sat for around 5.5 hours today. It will sit for 2 further days, and then we expect some kind of decision early next week. But there has been a lot of people watching it, a lot of commentary online. It's been trending all day on Twitter, and essentially it boils down to the argument by Gina Miller's side that the Prime Minister was wrong in trying to frustrate or in frustrating Parliament having scrutiny, with what we heard in the Scottish case last week, where they decided that the Queen had been misled. And then the government's lawyers, they've been talking about this period of time normally being prorogued anyway. If you go back into parliamentary history, them not having this short return and Parliament having shorter terms. There's talk as well, then arguing that MPs, if they wanted, could have stopped this prorogation. So it has been an interesting legal day of the opening arguments.
Vincent, we've also heard from the lawyer of Boris Johnson saying that the Prime Minister will take steps if the court rules that the suspension of the Parliament was unlawful. Did he go into any further details about what could happen next?
Yeah, there was a really interesting exchange on this, because when he was asked what happens if this court declares the prorogation unlawful, one of the judges remarked this. Lord Keane, for the Prime Minister, said the Prime Minister will take any necessary steps to comply with the judgment of the court. The judge then asked that to be in writing. So that is obviously the court's position that it will take, requesting that possibly from the Prime Minister in writing. If the court does decide this, it will then be for MPs to see if they can get Parliament back quickly, earlier than the 14th when they are scheduled to go back. So, as I mentioned, this court case will go on for another 2 days. There'll be a really interesting session, though, on Thursday afternoon, we now understand, when the former Conservative Prime Minister, Sir John Major, will actually be giving oral evidence in here. Just the remarkable sight of a former Conservative Prime Minister speaking out against the current one over an issue which has plagued their party for decades, and that is the European Union. Back to you, Tokes.